For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal. I am Surya Gangadharan. You've all seen the images streaming out of Colombo in Sri Lanka over the last 24 hours. It appears that country is in the grip of mob rule. There are people who have taken over the presidential palace. The prime minister's home has been burnt. There's no visible government. And we understand it's not even clear where President Rajapaksa is, whether he's in the country or somewhere else. So in that situation, where do we go from here as far as the road ahead is concerned? I have with me Nitin Gokhale, editor-in-chief of StratNewsGlobal. Nitin, you were there in Sri Lanka not very long ago, a couple of months back. I think, was the situation just building up for this great climax?
Well, it didn't seem that way. It had deteriorated, certainly. There were shortages, the price rise was unprecedented, there was discontent, and the beginning of this Gota go home agitation. Gota is, of course, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, opposite the presidential palace on the golf face, had just begun. In fact, I was there, if I remember correctly, in the first week of April. And that is when it had started unraveling, really, the situation there. But that it will just go out of control like this, even I didn't think. Neither did many people who have been observing or observed Sri Lanka for a long time. They thought since the government had decided to go to the International Monetary Fund for a bailout package, things would turn around a bit. But I think the people were frustrated, are frustrated, they're angry, and the kind of letdown they feel with President Rajapaksa, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and his team has manifested in what happened on Saturday, 9th July.
You know, Nitin, this is mob rule. The mobs have taken over. There is no government. What are we looking at here? I mean, is this more than collapse?
It is a complete meltdown, as I mentioned in one of the pieces that I wrote on Sunday, which is on our website. Nobody expected this to deteriorate this fast. But like you said, it's a mob rule, and this is an amorphous mob. There is no central leadership, no organization to speak of where people were mobilized. It is sheer anger and frustration and desperation amongst people, which led to the scenes that we saw, that we witnessed on Saturday, where people just streamed into Colombo from various places, from the suburbs, from the town itself, and of course from outside the Colombo city, where they just decided they will go and take over these visible symbols of power or governance, really. But like you said, there is no government. There is the unknown entity where the president's whereabouts are not known for security reasons. The prime minister has lost his personal home in vandalism. Entire home was burnt down. And the only way forward is to go by what the constitution prescribes. And that's where the speaker of the parliament comes in, and his role comes in going forward. But at the moment, nearly 48 hours after what happened on Saturday, this is not clear who is going to be in charge of governance, in charge of government, and in charge of the administration in trying to get the situation back to normal. The mobs are still in the presidential palace, in the presidential residence. The prime minister is not visible. So right now, very fluid situation and chaotic situation, really, in Colombo.
So, in terms of a constitutional handover, President Gotabaya has said he will leave on Wednesday. Is he actually going to leave? There's a lot of uncertainty there. I mean, what happens?
Well, according to the Sri Lankan constitution, and one, I have not studied it, I'm no constitutional expert, but whatever the experts have written or have spoken about, it seems that there is a provision for the current cabinet headed by President Gotabaya and, of course, the Prime Minister Ranil Wickeramasinghe. All the ministers have to resign together, and elect or allow the speaker to become interim president for 30 days maximum, for a month long period according to the constitution. And then in the interim period, from amongst the MPs, the current members of parliament, a prime minister and a council of ministers would be chosen by the parliament, not by the people in that sense, but by the parliament. And then they'll take charge of the of governance before elections can be contemplated and ordered in the next 5 or 6 months. All this is fine when the situation is normal, when your financial condition is normal. But here there are two extraordinary factors which have to be considered. One is the total collapse of the political system. Nobody knows who's in charge. The army has stepped back. The police are also, kind of confused of who to take orders from, and that's of course as far as law and order is concerned. And the desperation to have foreign exchange or funds for buying essentials, food items, drugs, medicines, that is, fuel. For instance, today there is shortage of fuel, which India has been supplying to Sri Lanka on either credit line or giving grants. All that has been happening. 2 shipments have just arrived in Colombo, or are arriving in Colombo this week, for the country to move on automobiles. But nobody seems to know where it's going to go. Where is the LPG, the cooking gas? So we just heard that the president has now said that whatever orders he issues will go through the speaker, and that should be taken as the official order, because he's still, remember, he is the elected president with 52% vote, and he's still in chair. He hasn't resigned, and neither has the prime minister. So both of them, for name's sake, are supposed to be in charge. So I think they are caught between this pressure from the mob and the pressure to keep the government afloat, or at least going. Because without a semblance of government, neither the IMF nor countries such as India and maybe the European countries and America are going to give more money, more aid, because they must know who's in charge, who's going to distribute the aid, the money, where is it going to be spent, all that. So right now, nobody knows what exactly is happening there. There are lots of backroom discussions, back channel discussions, that who will take charge of the government if the speaker takes it, who becomes president after the current president resigns. So there are, I'm sure, lots of negotiations, political negotiations happening. Once that happens, then we'll have a clarity on what governance will be there or what government structure will be there. Only then the IMF will come into the picture, which has made it clear that unless there is stability there, it is not even going to consider giving any money to Sri Lanka. So either way, Sri Lanka is doomed, because on the one hand, the mob is desperate, it is angry, it has taken over everything that is possible, the symbols of power. But that mob is not going to help in a way, or its behavior, to get any money or any help from anywhere else.
So even an all-party government, if the mob decides that they don't want them, I mean, you have nothing then.
You have nothing then, and see, there is a dilemma. Like the mob wants, or a lot of people who are angry with the politicians, especially with the Rajapaksa clan, including President Gotabaya and his elder brother Mahinda and the 2 other brothers. They say that elections is the only way out. There should be quick elections to both parliament as well as presidential election. But again, there is a dilemma that while the current presidency has a lot of unbridled powers vested in the president, is something that people don't accept. But to change that, they have to have the current parliament amending that constitution, and then curtailing the president's powers, and then ordering elections. But a bankrupt country which defaulted on its sovereign commitments in May cannot even afford elections. Now, who will conduct elections? Who will enforce discipline? If the mob takes over like this, who is going to guarantee? Now, this is a vicious circle for this beautiful country with such warm people otherwise, who have been driven to desperation with their backs to the wall. There's no food, there is no fuel, there is no medicine, and there is no hope. I mean, that's something that one is really concerned about, just as a normal human being, not even an observer, not even an analyst. But that's the situation there currently as far as Sri Lanka is concerned.
India has given over $3 billion in aid, food, fuel, etc. How much more do you think we can afford to give?
Well, India has deep pockets, at least for a country like Sri Lanka, certainly. But as I said, I think India is also now being cautious. The statement that was given out by the MEA on Sunday speaks about standing by with the people of Sri Lanka. It does not talk about standing by with one politician or the other politician. Naturally so, because ultimately the people will determine who will remain in power or who will come to power. But the fact is, when it comes to the nitty-gritty, the practical aspects of giving that aid, how much do you give it? Who do you give it to? And does it get then distributed to the people who need it? Is the question that India will ask itself and the people who are interacting with the Indian interlocutors. I think that's where I think there is a pause in the aid that India has given unconditionally. Just before this happened last week, uh, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had made a statement during an interview that India has given unconditional support. We have carried that excerpt of that interview briefly on our website, where he speaks about the difference between what the Chinese did and what India has done. India has given unconditional support, aid, financial assistance, whereas China wanted Sri Lanka not to go to IMF, wanted to take Sri Lanka to take more loan to cover the earlier loans, which is predatory and which is the ultimate step in a debt trap. So that is the difference. And India still has that goodwill. India still has that standing. But how do you proceed? What are the
Yeah.
practical steps is something that I think it's still being worked out. We'll have to wait, I think, for the next 24 hours to see how things unfold. Wednesday, of course, is a crucial day. But again, there is a jostling, political jostling happening between various politicians, various parties. And remember, the SLPP, which is the ruling party
Yeah.
currently, still has majority in parliament. Now, if that SLPP decides not to give any cooperation to the all-party government, then the entire arrangement that is being looked at might just
Falls apart.
collapse. Yeah, it just falls apart. So, that's where I think nobody knows which way it is going, which way it is headed. But I think ultimately what is needed is that people get immediate support in terms of what they need for their day-to-day livelihood and their day-to-day survival, and then look at how things will improve going forward.
Now, India has ties with all across the political spectrum in Sri Lanka. What do you believe we would be telling the politicians there at this point? Do you think, first of all, we're telling them anything because this is a sensitive time? And if we are, what are we counseling them?
I think it's a tightrope walk for India and India's mission in Colombo, and of course Indian Ministry of External Affairs in Delhi, to really strike a balance between what it wants to do in Sri Lanka. While it is talking to various politicians across the spectrum, as you said, from the Tamils in the north to the minority Muslim leaders to opposition parties and the ruling party, of course. India is well aware that the Rajapaksas have lost credibility. But the unfortunate part in Sri Lanka today is that most politicians have lost credibility. I
Yeah,
mean, their degree of loss of credibility will be varying. But
yeah,
if you speak to people on the ground and common citizens, and which I keep speaking to a lot of my friends in Sri Lanka, as you know, I've been going there for 17, 18 years now, very close friends there. All of them are very disenchanted with politicians and their ways and the way the whole thing has evolved. This is the economic collapse, as I have written and as we have talked about at a number of places, is not an overnight phenomenon. It was coming. The train wreck was visible, but there was no steps taken to stop it or to avoid it. And the whole thing is, from here, where does Sri Lanka go? I mean, who's credible enough to stand up and say, okay, I'm going to take charge and bring Sri Lanka out of this mess? There is nobody of that stature, and that is India's problem. Who do you prop up? If you prop up or support one faction, then the other will not cooperate, and then the whole arrangement collapses. So I think India is also playing a waiting game, like all others. But India's role will remain central to how Sri Lanka resolves the current crisis.
I mean, China, they've been very quiet throughout this entire controversy, I mean, it's very strange and even curious. Why? I mean, don't they have
Well,
stakes there?
they have stakes, but they've been very clever. They sort of did finance this unrealistic, I would say, vanity projects, if you want to call them that, uh, infrastructure projects, and quietly went away. While they got some returns in the previous government, and they realized that beyond a point, they will not get anything from there. And many of those sovereign bonds, commercial borrowing from the market, was routed through Hong Kong and through other financial capitals of the world, where the Chinese continue to hold some kind of a whip hand against Sri Lanka. But it did not want to appear to be meddling, and it has played a very smart card by not giving any aid, or which can be seen as a grant, which can be seen as giving help to the Sri Lankans, because the Chinese made it very clear very quickly when the government decided to go to the IMF that it is very unhappy, and it has remained firm on that China doesn't want any country that it gives money to go to the IMF, because then books get opened up.
Yeah.
There is scrutiny of the finances. There, the books are scrutinized, and books are then examined by IMF auditors, and very strict conditions are laid down for the repayment of loan that the IMF will give. In that, the Chinese may not get the kind of money that they would get back from uh, countries like such as Sri Lanka or elsewhere. For Sri Lanka, since we're discussing Sri Lanka, so therefore it is keeping quiet. Your fundamental question is that what is the Chinese role? The Chinese are watching and waiting, and they don't want to dirty their hands in that sense. They are safe players, and they always look for to extract their pound of flesh. Unlike India, which will go out of its way to help neighbors and friends without thinking of the consequences or without thinking of the returns, which has been done even in this particular current crisis, as we see and we look back. $3.8 billion in various forms since January this year. India hasn't given it to any other country. Perhaps comparable would be what was given to refugees in 1971, when the East Pakistan refugees or the Bengalis were streaming into India. But that was a different situation. This is a different situation. But India has stood by Sri Lanka, and I think hopefully those who will come in charge and who will become in charge going forward in Sri Lanka will remember this, and India will have its standing intact going forward. But the Chinese will not have that, because people have now realized that Chinese are no friends of theirs. They're just Shylocks, excuse me, trying to extract their pound of flesh from the
If
hapless
you
Sri Lanka.
recall, Nitin, $3 billion was roughly the amount we invested in Afghanistan.
We did,
And, it's
with no
there's
hope of
no,
returns. But I think that that is now standing us in good stead, in a way that India has gone back there. The Taliban is inviting India to go back there, and they
yeah,
didn't destroy anything that India built. Fortunately,
yeah, true.
I think that's something that should be seen as a positive thing, rather than thinking that we've it's gone down the drain. But yes, you're right. I mean, how much money can India give? There is a limit to it.
Yeah, yeah, true.
India is not in a very strong economic position, although far better than any other country in this part of the world. So therefore, there we are, and I don't know where we are going. But Sri Lanka, well, I feel for it and for its people, and like all of us who have reported on Sri Lanka would know that it had such potential, and
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
every politician, and especially Gotabaya Rajapaksa, wanted it to become the next Singapore. But just look at the way things
Yeah.
have panned out in less than 3 years.
So, last two questions, Ritin. One, you mentioned the Tamils earlier. What are the Tamils doing? We heard a lot about them coming together during the early stages of this uprising, and now it seems to have kind of dissipated. I mean, there's a bit of a mystery there.
Well, no, it's, I think, for the first time in so many years now, for in nearly 40 years, that the differences, visible differences between Tamils and Sinhala majority are at least outwardly not visible. The mob that came in, I think, consisted of almost all communities. I mean, Sinhalas, Muslims, Tamils, and there is one school of thought which says that, look, when you practice a majoritarian politics, then one way or the other the country will collapse somewhere, which I think is exaggeration, which is not the case, because that is a theory. But in practice, bad economic policies, bad implementation, and wrong decisions really have brought Sri Lanka to where they are. But the Tamils, of course, form a major part. I mean, they are the largest minority anyway in Sri Lanka. And I think they would also be looking forward to a more inclusive government, I would think, going forward, in the sense that they get equal share, or at least proportionate share of their development. They get equal opportunities in jobs, government jobs. But the whole issue here right now is of survival. Politics will come later, or identity politics will come later. So the Tamils will also realize that they are um, part of this country which is going through this turmoil, and they have to do their bit. So I think right now they have reduced their stridency, or their uh, determination to have more autonomy or more political rights, and are trying to get things right by putting pressure along with the majority Sinhala, which is the silver lining as far as the society is concerned in Sri Lanka.
So, last question, the army. General Shavindra Silva is Gotabaya's choice. So, so far, no indication that the army wants to take over, and it seems to have been played a more neutral role. What's your sense?
Well, at least in this last 48 hours, it has shown that it does not want to intervene directly. It does not want to take over the administration. But the fact is that under Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the army did play a big role in trying to contain COVID, in trying to leading the task force for COVID mitigation during the financial crisis too. But certainly the army knows its limitations, that when a mob of such magnitude erupts or comes together, it is prudent not to try and control that kind of a mob. It's a expression of anger, popular
Yeah.
support to the discontent. So the army is, in a way, very disciplined post the 2009 end of the Elam War 4. But it will certainly play a major role in stabilizing the country as far as law and order is concerned, as far as giving the kind of protection that the politicians will need, or the ballast, if I may use that expression, to any future administration in Sri Lanka. It remains an integral and an important part of the balance of power in Sri Lanka. And no matter who the president or the prime minister is, they will have to take on board the army. Shavindra Silva is certainly not a rookie. He's honed his skills during the war, and then has subsequently risen to become chief of defense staff. But again, it will all depend on what kind of compact, what kind of negotiations happen between politicians and other arms of the government before the army can be utilized for what Sri Lanka hopes and will hope to be a stable situation going forward.
So, just to sum up, Sri Lanka's road ahead is uncertain. The mobs still rule. The politicians are negotiating or bickering, we don't know which. And India is playing a waiting game, hoping that somehow, perhaps by some miracle, things get sorted out, common sense prevails. On that note, Nitin, thanks a lot. And looking forward to
Pleasure.
see where this chaos in Sri Lanka irons itself out. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
And for those of you who have joined us on this conversation, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on our social media, including Twitter and Instagram. Thank you and good night.